President Joe Biden announced just yesterday that he's gonna be signing a resolution to nix the District of Columbia's crime bill. And he announces with a tweet saying, I support DC statehood and home rule, but I don't support some of the changes DC Council put forward over the mayor's objections, such as lowering penalties for carjackings. If the Senate votes to overturn what DC Council did, I'll sign it. So we're gonna get to the criticism of that and also how what he's citing there isn't super accurate. But I love that you're like, no, I support their self-determination. They should rule themselves, but I disagree with some of the choices they're making, so screw them. I'm gonna destroy the entire thing. I don't think that support means what you think it means. If you believe that people should be able to choose, unless they choose in a way you don't want them to, in which case you take away their choice, that's not how it's supposed to work. I'm not the only person who thinks this. AOC tweeted a response, this ain't it. DC has a right to govern itself like any other state or municipality. If the president supports DC statehood, he should govern like it. Plenty of places pass laws the president may disagree with. He should respect the people's government of DC just as he does elsewhere, which is a great point. President Biden has, and even did in that say, he supports them becoming a full-on state. So why don't you act like it? Why don't you act like you believe that the many, many people who live there deserve to make choices for themselves? And the mayor's veto was overridden by the city council 12-1. This wasn't close. This wasn't some divisive thing where they just barely managed to squeak through. It was fairly overwhelming. Doesn't mean that it was right or that you can't criticize it, but overturning it is way beyond criticism. What do you think, Viviana?
This has been a struggle that the Biden administration and frankly, the Democratic Party has had for decades when it comes to crime. They don't want to appear too soft on crime, so then they come on a little too strong. And in this, he's gonna die on that hill as opposed to allowing DC to become, the state with its own views and perspectives as other states are allowed to have, Texas. So, you can't pick and choose which state gets to choose what they want to do, right? You're gonna allow Florida and Texas to be doing some ridiculous things, but yet DC wants to make their own rules and you're gonna be against that. But this, like I said, goes back to this crime bill and how it could appear that he is soft on crime as we go into an election year. And this is a problem that the Clintons had, or I'll just say Clinton because it wasn't the Clintons. But they got really, really tough on crime in the 90s, and we've seen the aftermath of it. And in fact, this crime bill is really a reflection of the harsh penalties that came into place during that time. Even to minors. I mean, we saw the youth authorities across the country change into these prison systems for children and really starting to regulate it like a prison. And these are kids who are 14, 15, 16 years old. And so this harsh view on crime is something that the Democratic Party really needs to figure out, because you can't be on the fence like that. You can't say that you're for the people and you support what they want, and then come down harsh with a hammer. Oh, well, we don't want to do. So, this is the problem with Biden. He tries to be safe a little too much, and then he gets into some hot water.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, like that's going to be an ongoing debate inside of the Democratic Party. But I also want to be clear about what is actually happening with this change, because if you just read what Biden says, they're lowering the penalties for carjackings, which by the way, there have been 94 carjackings in DC just this year so far. I don't think there's been 94 days, so that's at least one per day on average. So you might see that and think, well, wait, why would they be lowering it? Like, because he doesn't say to what or from what. I guess they're just letting them go. I guess they give them 20 minutes in the slammer or something. And then a reasonable person would read that and think, well, I don't want to be carjacked. Why would you be going easy on them? Well, hold up a second. So let's talk about what's actually happening. So you have, under the current code, the maximum sentence for armed carjacking is 40 years, okay? That's the same penalty as second-degree murder, more than double the penalty for second-degree sexual assault. So just to put it in perspective, it's way harsher than sexual assault. No judge would ever dream of handing down anywhere close to a 40-year sentence under a single carjacking. That has been the status quo. It technically can get you 40 years, but nobody is actually gonna give you 40 years for it. Rather, the harshest penalties handed down today run about 15 years. So they don't even give them half of the maximum penalty. In recognition that some rare cases may warrant even longer sentences, the RCCA authorizes a 24-year maximum sentence for carjacking. That's the new bill. So under the new bill, you could potentially get a like 50% longer penalty than what you in reality are actually getting under the current system. So it's not inaccurate to say that it's lowering the penalty, sort of. Hypothetically, it's lowering the maximum penalty. In reality, you're likely to get the exact same penalty and might even get a longer one than what you currently get under this system. So maybe Biden doesn't understand that. Maybe he's just being openly dishonest about what this would actually do. But don't believe the hype about it. They're just letting people out the next day. 15 years or 25 years or 40 years, you're paying the penalty for a carjacking.
And that 40-year penalty was probably put in place in the 90s when that crime bill went really strong across the country. And let's talk about why we're seeing more smash and grab jobs. Let's talk about why we're seeing more people stealing cars and doing that. That's a bigger problem than just this one little off-put tweet. We're talking about inflation being high. We're talking about the price of eggs. I mean, that used to be just like a euphemism, but now it's like, let's talk about the price of eggs. This has a lot to do with the price of eggs. So we got to look at the country as a whole and look at why crimes are being committed across the country and in big cities like DC, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and really get to the bottom of that. And they don't want to Biden doesn't want to talk about that. He'd rather just be like, no, we got to close the book on him and just call it. That way they only read headlines. It's true, John. Very few people. Your audiences are readers. They go into the details, but very few people just read the headline.
Yeah.
I mean, this
is for him to be able to say that he's tough on crime to get some Republicans to they're not gonna give him credit. He thinks it will. It won't actually work for that. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. With that said, he'll try. He's continuing to try. But thank you to AOC for pushing back against that and being consistent on DC statehood. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.